Alrighty, welcome back to the Cashflow Project. If you are listening or watching us for the first time, welcome. Our goal here at the Cashflow Project is to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. We sit down and we talk to local businesses in Greeley area to get an insight of how they work, how they worked from the ground up, and trying to educate ourselves how we can become better entrepreneurs.
So today we have the opportunity to speak with the man who has helped us behind the scenes with our recording and getting our podcast recorded, and that is Josh Valdez. He has so much to share with us today, including his business ventures and experience in the arts and media industry he has.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So can we begin just with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Joshua Valdez, and I've worked here at LINC since the building opened, and that was in May of 2013. This particular room, the studio that we're in right now, was opened this past January, so we've been here been open for a little over a year. In addition to working in here, have also worked in the makerspace up front where the 3D printers and things like that are. I've also worked as a library associate at the front desk and throughout the building. But I think by far this is one of the more rewarding parts of the job, being back here. I've gotten to help lots of folks like yourself with getting their own podcast off the ground. In the other room where the video and production stuff happens, I've gotten to help people get a lot of their YouTube channels off the ground. And speaking of entrepreneurship, you mentioned that that's one of your goals is to try and help the younger generation be more successful with that.
Mm-hmm.
This studio resource that's pretty much exactly what it's intended for. So we do a lot of work in the video recording studio with helping people to do things like product photography. I know that you interviewed in one of your past episodes one of the kids from Youth Biz that created their own products and things like that. And they came in here to take their photos for their products and do some promotional commercials and things like that. So the space in and of itself here lends itself pretty directly to what your goal is. So as a community resource, any young person looking to put a professional touch on whatever their, new business is, this is exactly what that's for.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, thank you. I'm going to start with some icebreaker questions. Would you rather have 3 legs or 3 arms?
Oh, that's hard. I think I'd go for the 3 arms. There's quite a few times when you're rigging things up in the studio where 3 arms would certainly be handy.
Yeah. So our next question is going to be, what is your favorite thing about yourself and why?
That's an interesting one. I'd say that in general, one of the things that I value the most about myself is being able to adapt to different situations.
Mm-hmm.
Part of any business, whether it's a small business, being an entrepreneur, or working for someone else, having good customer service and being able to meet people where they're at is oftentimes 90% of the job.
Absolutely.
And in an environment like this, everyone's coming in with different kinds of creative ideas. So I think my ability to kind of adapt to different people and different types of situations is probably the one that I'd value the most. And it's definitely served me not only personally, but professionally as well.
Awesome.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I've lived quite a few places, and I think that if I could just retire today and go anywhere I wanted, I'd probably go back to Kona, Hawaii. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived, and the pace of life in general is just so much slower there. And I'm a big fan of that. Business and family brought me back to the mainland. But I would go back in a heartbeat.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very beautiful place.
So moving into our more business related sort of questions, how long have you been working at the LINC?
So I've been with the library district since this particular facility opened, and that was in May of 2023. So it's been a couple of years now. Prior to that, I worked for School District 6. That's kind of where I came from to the library district.
Awesome.
And how did you start this journey?
Well, I never ever envisioned myself working in a library. That was never a goal. Circumstance kind of brought me here. My formal arts training is in music. I play violin, and all of my minors have always been videography and composition, things like that. So this has always been something that I like to do, and I've done it semi-professionally in other capacities in the past, but never did I think that I'd be doing anything like this in a public library. It certainly was kind of a matter of circumstance. I have quite a few friends who are authors who work here at the library district, and they were the ones who told me, "Hey, there's this new building being built. They're going to have this recording studio. You'd be perfect for it. You should go check it out." And of course, my immediate reaction was, "At the library?" It didn't sound very enticing in the beginning. And I already have and was running the computer repair business here locally in town. So I kind of hesitated a little bit to go for this because it would mean I would have to really balance my time in a very meticulous kind of way to be able to have time to do both things. But in the end, I think it was worth it. I love this particular position, helping the community with these resources that I think are a very valuable thing for particularly entrepreneurs to have.
Awesome. So can you tell me a little bit more about like your role in the Library Studio podcast, like what your day-to-day looks like, and then how did you get started in this field?
Sure. So an average day in here, basically, you spend the first couple hours of your day scheduling. So as I'm sure you guys are probably aware, you have to fill out a form that is a request form to come in here. This space of the library, we like to have a little bit more information about what you want to do before you get here, so that we can be as prepared as possible for whatever type of project that you want to work on. So the first couple of hours is scheduling, the boring part, the part that nobody likes to do. Get everything scheduled. The space typically opens at 10 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, and it opens at noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I've got some time in the morning to do that part. I'm also responsible for program planning. So in March here, I'm going to be doing a 3-week series on product photography. Another thing that's a super valuable resource for entrepreneurs. So that's kind of what my morning consists of, is scheduling and program planning for upcoming programs. The afternoons are pretty much entirely just helping produce the shows. Podcasts, typically, once I have trained people how to use this Rodecaster, there's not really a lot of need for me at that point. It's a pretty simple process. It's, kind of put your memory card in, hit record, and off you go. I do a lot more assistance in this room with people who are doing things that are more musically oriented. So this same board has the ability to plug into digital audio workstation, so you can do multi-track musical recordings. And we do have quite a few musicians who come in here to use it in that capacity. When that happens, I am a little bit more hands-on with that process to help walk them through that. The video studio is where I typically am more involved in that process. We have a huge range of people who come in to use the space, everyone from someone who's never touched a video camera before and doesn't really know at all what to do, to people who have worked in the industry for decades and don't really need a whole lot of help, and kind of everything in between. So that involves, explaining to people how audio cables work, explaining to them how to change the settings on the camera. And that's kind of a typical day in here. As far as how I got into the industry, I went to Denver School of the Arts and I was a music major and a cinematography minor. So I kind of always had it in my head that this is kind of what I wanted to do. But as far as getting work in the industry, Denver School of the Arts is really good at helping to plug you into that community as you graduate. So I was fortunate enough to have, quite a few people to call upon for help in as far as employment goes. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
Awesome.
That sounds really rewarding. You get to help people learn all kinds of new skills and come up with beautiful new productions of their products or anything they want to videograph, I guess, and podcasts, obviously. You help us. What do you think is the most rewarding part of being here in the studio cast area?
I think the most rewarding part of doing this is giving people access to a resource that they normally couldn't afford, that gives them the upper leg in success. So, having access to this and having the ability to professionally create content is something that costs money usually. And so it's very rewarding to be able to facilitate this so that it's more equitable, so that everyone has an opportunity to create, and everyone has the ability to, express themselves in a way that isn't going to be prohibitive, financially. So it's very rewarding. And I, on a fairly regular basis, have people say, it really means a lot to me that you're helping me with this. And I think sometimes I get a little numb to it because I do it every day. But people are generally very, very grateful. They're like, I've had this idea for so long and I really wanted to do it and I've just been too afraid to try and I didn't want to spend the money on the equipment and, and now that they're doing it and coming in on a consistent basis, they really, are genuinely grateful. So that's very rewarding. And it's certainly a lot different than working in a public school. When you work in this space, people are here because they want to be here. They want to learn. So it's kind of rewarding to come to work and have people be grateful for you showing up.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like a lot of really valuable innovation and creativity does go on here. Would you be able to give us some examples of the types of projects that you see people working on here a lot?
Sure. It's just as wide and varied as the citizens of the town. I've done everything from a 4-piece bluegrass band came in to record some things. That was really fun. Obviously, podcasts have come in here. It's been really entertaining to see the different types of shows that people come up with and the different creative ideas that they decide they want their show to be about. There's one project that happens in here that is called, anyhow, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But anyhow, these two ladies, they board horses and run a veterinary clinic. And so their whole podcast is about the day-to-day things that happen when you board horses. And you'd think it would be a fairly simple thing. You feed them, you clean their pens, things like that. But they just have the most interesting stories. Then we do product photography. And we also have classes. So if you don't have an idea, or if you already have done something and you just need to figure out what to do with it now, we do offer classes for the Adobe Creative Suite. So you can come in to learn how to edit your podcast. You can come in to learn how to do those things. I'm trying to think of some other examples. I'm kind of getting off topic. We have a person who comes in and records workout videos for an app that they run. So think kind of Jane Fonda or Richard Simmons, that kind of thing. But they have an app, and then they come in here and record all their content, upload that. And so with that being said, here at the library, we do very much so encourage people to use it for business. We do We are totally fine with businesses coming here to create content and, that type of thing. We do have a board-approved policy, though, that says that because this is a free space that's open to the public, that if you're going to be profiting from what you create in here, we just recommend that you throw a little donation back to the library. Now, we don't police that. We don't check receipts. But generally speaking, so far, I've got quite a few professional photographers that come in that charge their clients, and they're more than happy to donate a little bit. So if anyone ever comes in to do that type of thing, when you sign in on the iPad, there's just a QR code right above that. So if you wish to make a donation, you just do it that way.
That's great. I think it's very cool that it's open to anybody here. Like, anybody can come in, whereas like maybe somewhere else they're going to charge you and people can't afford that. In that kind of sense, how does working at this library's podcast studio different than working at like a commercial recording studio?
That's a great question, actually. When you're working in a commercial studio and people are paying top dollar to just be there, expectations are really high. So you want to try to make sure you get things right the first time, every time. And that can be a challenge and slightly stressful. And they have an expectation that, I've spent this money and this is what I expect to get out of it. Where in this capacity, in a public space like this, there's just so much more latitude. Because it's free, the expectation level, I feel, is not only lower, but I feel like the intimidation level is lower too. Because I think sometimes people are afraid to try something like this because it costs money. And they're like, well, what if I'm no good at it? Or, something like that. Then I've wasted all this money and I'm embarrassed and, Whereas in here, it's all kind of risk-free. You come in, and if it doesn't work the first time, you just come in tomorrow and do it again. So the consequences for failure are more of an opportunity for growth in this type of environment.
All right. So the here at the LINC, y'all provide like a lot of access to technology for people in the community. And with that, I wanted to ask, like, you've probably seen some like technological advancements even in the few years that you've been working here. Like, how do you think technology is going to like shape the future of libraries, and how does the LINC stay up to date on technology?
I think that's a good point to bring up. I think that public libraries in general, in its even recent past, have really struggled with that question of how to keep up with it. I think the most recent example in recent history is just the advent of the internet. Prior to libraries existing, and I'm probably dating myself now, but when I was in high school, there was no internet. And when you wanted to do a paper, you came to the library. And so the library was always kind of a book-oriented type of place. With the invention of the internet, there was a lot of talk that libraries were just going to cease to exist. I mean, what's the use for them anymore? Who needs that when I have all this information right at my fingertips? So as a library district, and as not just us, but I think nationally, this was kind of a trend. We decided to embrace it. So yes, the internet exists, but let's bring computers into the library. And that was met with a great deal of resistance at first. People were, why would we put computers in the library? That's ridiculous. And turns out that it's now one of our most used resources. In retrospect, it's probably one of the things that saved the public library. So in a lot of ways, I think now, kind of fast forwarding to now, I think one of the more obvious things is AI. It's having a huge impact on things. And I feel like the library is a good place to come to learn how to use that technology in a responsible way. Because as you know, probably from things that you've read, the AI is not perfect. It only knows what it's been taught, and it makes mistakes. So now more than ever, having literacy and the ability to think critically is more important than ever. And the library is a great place to go when you're fact checking that stuff.
Mhm.
So I think that as a public resource, it would be beneficial for us to make sure we don't ignore that. And already the library district has started offering classes on how to interact with AI and how to use it responsibly. And our job resource center has a class on how to use it to help create your resume and your cover letter and things like that. So I think that rather than seeing the new trends as a challenge, we're kind of trying to embrace them a little bit out ahead of it happening. And I think with all technologies, there's always going to be some naysayers that say, "Oh, well, what are you doing that for?" But I think HPLD specifically has done a really good job of listening to the public and what they want and what they want to learn. So as far as technology goes, we try to be on the cutting edge as much as possible. We've got financial restrictions and things like that we have constraints that we have to work within. But we have things like VR work training. So you can come to a class here, and we've got Oculus headsets where you can learn how to be a diesel mechanic, or learn how to. What are some other things that they do? I think one of them is like a pilot's program, so you can do some entry-level pilot training. So the library is trying to leverage that technology to kind of bridge the gap in workforce development. So there are definitely a large sector of the community that can't afford college. And so the library is kind of acting as that like stopgap in between access and education. So we want to provide you with at least the framework here with the technology we have available to help you advance your own life, whether that's getting a better job or becoming more literate in a technology. Coming to the library to learn how to use Office or to learn how to use Facebook. So I probably way more information than we needed, but that's kind of where we're at as far as technology and education.
That's pretty cool. I think it's really awesome that the library is trying to evolve with technology and kind of go along with today's more modern, I guess, kind of era. Around the technology, what kind of types of equipment do you use within the studio, and how have they evolved over time?
That's a great question too. When I first started learning about cinematography and audio recording, things worked much differently. So for one, cameras used film, and everything's digital now, which is fantastic in my opinion. It's a whole lot easier to envision what your final outcome is going to be when you're working with digital technology. So that's probably one of the biggest things is the transition from film to digital recording for me. So no more darkroom to develop your pictures, and honestly, that was actually a really fun part of learning photography for me in the beginning. And now being able to just pop the memory card in and see it on a giant screen is nice, but it's just not as fun.
Yeah.
Lights have also come a long way. When I very first started doing this, everything was incandescent bulbs. And you had to wear gloves when you installed them because if you got any oils from your skin on them, they'd explode when they get hot. So it was kind of dangerous. Now almost everything is LED lights, and that you almost never have to change bulbs or anything in. And they don't get as hot either. One of the things that I remember very vividly from one of the very first video shoots I ever did was standing under these incandescent lights, and they're hugely bright, and trying to get through lines and not sweat the entire time because it's 98 degrees in the room. So having LED lights has been a huge advantage or a huge advancement, I think. Just so much more comfortable now to shoot for long periods of time.
So the LINC, you mentioned it was started in like May of 2023. It's only been here for a few years. What did you do in your career before that? You mentioned working with the district, but just like how has your career gone before you came to the LINC?
So when I graduated high school, I thought that I was going to go directly into a job like this. And I decided that I wanted to wait a little while, take a little bit of time before I went jumping into anything crazy. And I ended up in the education field, which was not where I thought I was going to be, specifically special education. And I've always loved technology in general. But when I started working for the district, I focused a lot on what they call SWAC, which is basically assistive devices for people who have some kind of disability. So we did a lot of, picture boards and different kinds of technology that assist people in speaking and interacting with the people around them. And after I did that I was there for quite a while. I think it was about 7 years. And I realized that the technology part of that job is what I was really actually good at. And I experienced working with the parents of these students that there was no resource in the community that helped them learn how to use these devices. And, Medicaid would approve a device and they'd give them the device and they'd send them home with it and go, good luck. And so I really got a lot of reward out of teaching parents and families how to interact with that tool and get the most out of it. But when I realized there was nothing like that existed in the community, is when I decided to start the local computer business. It's called GoGoZen Computer Repair, but I feel like if I knew then what I know now, I would have called it something different. I think computer services or technology services is probably more accurate. And as the name implies, it's centered on making your interaction with technology less stressful and less expensive. So the idea is that if you are a parent that has one of these devices or something like that you're giving your kid, for not $1 million, you can come to us and we'll sit down with you and spend as much time as we need in your space. So go, it means that we're mobile. So we come to you. And the Zen part's kind of self-explanatory. Basically just trying to keep that stress level really low. And help people to interact with the technology that they have and understand it better so that they can fully utilize it. So that was kind of driven by just the fact that it didn't exist. And it was something that I knew that I wanted and I wished that I would have had. So I was like, well, I guess if it doesn't exist, you make it. And as George Bernard Shaw says, don't wait for the right opportunity, create it. So I did.
That's really cool. You kind of mentioned how you have a variety of people that come in and use different pieces of the studio and whatnot. How does this podcast studio collaborate with other departments within this library?
That's a good question, too. One of the most recent, or one of the more immediate things that's happening, this podcast room gets used to record all the audio for our escape room that we host here. So anytime you come into one of those escape rooms and you hear the narrators or the voice actors, that's all library staff recording in here, which is pretty fun. We also run a library district podcast in this room as well that you can view on the mylibrary.us website. And let's see what else. What's the question again?
It was how the podcast studio kind of collaborates with other departments in the library.
Sure. So the escape room is one. We also do a lot of promotional content for other programming in the library. So when we have other types of things going on, like the seed exchange or the painting programs, or we have a Mad Hatter Tea Party every year. So I'll go in with the cameras and photograph and video those things to put on our social media to promote the library. And various different other departments will come in here also to film or to record things that will promote their specific program. And this isn't just for the LINC staff. This is meant to be a resource for the entire library district. So not just for patrons, but for the other branches as well. So if they want to create more professional looking social media content, or if they want to do something special for a program, this space is intended as kind of a utility for that. The same way that the makerspace has also functioned in a lot of the same way, where they will help other programs create the materials or whatever it is that they need for that.
Amazing. It seems like there's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. Specifically, are there any exciting new projects or developments going on for the library's podcast studio right now?
One of the things that I'm the most excited about is in 2025, we are planning on starting a oral history archive. So we will be working in conjunction with the Greeley History Museum to start a local community oral history archive. So we will likely start with the stories that we need to have told now, because the characters in those stories are aging very quickly out of existence. So things like the Spanish colony, and hearing firsthand accounts from people that were part of that, I think are important stories to tell. Telling stories about local education. How did UNC come to be? Why is it an education school? How did all this come into focus here? And then on the flip side of that, getting the stories from just everyday residents. The guy at the deli, the person that waits on you at the restaurant, what is their story? And how did they come here? And because Greeley is evolving so quickly, I believe the mayor said a few days ago that Greeley's population is expected to double by 2050. So with that being said, I think Greeley's evolution is happening really quickly. And I'm very passionate about making sure that we document that. And as far as technology and AI goes, my ultimate dream is that maybe a decade or two from now, once we've collected that mass of information about the people that live here, that we can use technology and AI to aggregate that information into something that's interactive. So imagine being able to go to a website and be able to interact with a bot that can answer questions about what it was like to live here in 1980, or, and then rather than just being a static book, or something like that, I would love to have some kind of interactive database. And I feel like people learn well that way. So it's a long-term goal, but hopefully we can get that ball rolling this year.
That's a very exciting history. Lots of history everywhere, and being able to document it as it changes and evolves is really cool. Speaking of history, how has libraries or podcasts kind of affected you while you were growing up?
Well, libraries specifically were a huge part of my life growing up. Like I said, I'm I'm ancient, so there was no internet during that time. So I have pretty fond memories of school libraries, particularly. Where I grew up in Denver, we actually didn't have a local library. So a lot of my memory of the library was the bookmobile. And do we have that here? Have you guys ever heard of a bookmobile? So basically it's like a giant RV that they gut out and fill with bookshelves and books and other things that you can check out. And they basically go all around the communities that don't have public libraries and cooperate with the schools to come visit like once every couple of weeks. And so it was always really exciting when the library pulled up and you got to go out as a class and go pick out books. And it was also the only opportunity that we ever really had to have access to encyclopedias, which was a big deal at the time. And books are expensive. And not every family had a full set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So that's kind of my initial memory of libraries, and they were a big deal. And I remember when our neighborhood had our first public library built there, it was something that the whole community kind of rallied around. It was a really positive thing that happened. As far as podcasts go, when I was learning about audio engineering and things like that, podcasts didn't exist really yet. Everything was still pretty much AM, FM radio. Again, kind of pre-internet. So in that sense, almost everything we did was live. So when I was learning about how to do this kind of thing, a lot of the training was how to get through an entire conversation without stopping. Because dead air is dead time, and dead time is dead money. And in radio, like your worst enemy is silence. So podcasting has been somewhat new to me, in that like the workflow of how you produce it is completely different. So podcasting, you're recording everything beforehand and editing things down so everything sounds perfect, and maybe adding video, things like that. And you've got just so much more granular control over what you're doing. So the podcasters that I really have admired that come in here are the ones that are brave enough to live stream. This board does have the ability to do like a live stream. So if you wanted to have a show where you like took callers, if you wanted to be more like a genuine radio experience, it does do that. And I really take my hat off to the few people who have had the bravery to give that a try.
That's awesome. Sorry, I totally did not realize it was my turn to go.
That's okay.
So I'm just curious, like we were already sort of talking about the evolution of technologies in library spaces, but more specifically, how do you envision the future of audio in libraries, like as technology continues to change? Like, you keep calling yourself ancient. I'm not going to call you ancient, but you have like witnessed some changes through your career in like audio related endeavors. And I'm wondering like what changes you predict in the future.
Well, everything is getting smaller. This broadcaster, even 5 years ago, would have been a whole rack of equipment on the wall. 5, 6, 8 different pieces of equipment that all had very specific purposes. This technology puts it all in one box and makes it easy to use. So I think the biggest prediction I have for audio technology going forward is its ease of use. I think that as time goes on, it will get easier and easier for the everyday person to be able to do these things. And it's becoming less expensive too. So I think that in probably the next 5 or 6 years, it won't be strange to see this at your friend's house. So that's kind of where I see things going. Things are a little bit more affordable. Access is a little easier. things are getting smaller. As far as audio goes, the one thing that I would love to see in the near future is some kind of software or technology that makes this not necessary. One of the biggest hurdles podcasters and sound recording artists have is having a space that's silent. And it's a huge challenge. So if we can invent some kind of AI algorithm or some fancy thing to make it so that you don't need that, I think that would really broaden like the number of people that have access to it.
Yeah.
Along these studio lines again, and the projects that you've worked on, is there something that's most memorable to you about them? And kind of along those lines as well, is there an experience where you had to learn something new that you did not expect to learn?
Yes, actually. One of the really neat things about working in a library space like this is that the learning that happens in here is a two-way street. So I'm not always the instructor. We have such a wide variety of ability levels that comes in here that there are often people who come in here who know a whole lot more than I do. So it's really neat to get to learn new things from them. I'm not afraid at all to have somebody show me something new about a piece of equipment that I have. I really like learning new things. So I really enjoy it when patrons come in and can teach me something new. And then I can pass that along to the next patron. So there are, when I first started in this room, even though I've been doing cinematography and music and audio recording things for years, I'd never laid eyes on a Canon C70 or this specific Blackmagic camera. So just like any other job or industry, if you're not open to learning new skills or learning new ways of doing things, you can have a really rough time in life. Being adaptable, being willing to learn new things and being open to that, I think is super important. What was the second half of that question?
I think that was the second
Okay.
half. The first half was kind of just like, what is your most memorable project that you worked on here?
I think probably one of the most memorable things that we've done so far in here was with a local band called the Burrows.
I love the Burrows.
They're really, really kind of neat. They've got a super high energy, and they're very creative.
Yeah.
So it was, sometimes people will come in and they're like, I want to make this video and I kind of think I want it to look like this. And then they kind of stare at you and go, can you make that happen? The Burrows were really fun to work with because they not only came in with an idea, but a plan. And then so helping them execute that and go through those steps with such a enthusiasm was really fun. I think when people come in, they're excited to do it. It makes it all that much more fun. So I really enjoy doing music videos in here. I think that's probably one of the more creative, fun types of things that happens in here. The days when you get to change the lights from white to like fun colors and, move the camera around a little bit instead of just, talking heads. So yeah, I think that the Burrows is probably the most memorable one so far in here. But it hasn't been very long, so who knows? I'm sure I will be pleasantly surprised.
So you mentioned that you co-own a technology business called GoGo Zen Computer Repairs. The name GoGo Zen suggests a blend of efficiency and tranquility, sort of. How does that philosophy translate into your business practices?
So I'm always, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's at the library or at someone's house helping them with technology, my goal is always to bring things to a level that is comfortable, and to speak to people in a language that they understand. Oftentimes in the recording industry and in the computer industry, there's a lot of really technical jargon. And I think a lot of times people's experience when they come into these spaces is intimidating because they maybe don't know the vocabulary. And when they're speaking to someone that does, they feel talked down to. And it makes it a stressful experience. So I try to carry that Zen-like quality to everything I do because I want people to feel comfortable. I want them to have a positive experience with what they're doing and want to come back and do it again, regardless of whatever the situation is. And I think that that's applicable across not just in these two industries, but I think that's something that I think the business world as a whole is starting to embrace a little bit more now. There's a Japanese philosophy called Kaizen that basically means large improvement through small incremental change. And that's something that's been part of, Eastern business practice for a long time, but it's gaining a lot of popularity here in the West. And I think people are kind of discovering that, shooting for the moon is great, but, if I can make a 1% change every day, then eventually that will aggregate into, a larger goal being accomplished. So I think that attitude, that business philosophy is beneficial whether you're a grocery store or a recording studio. So I try to carry that to everything that I do.
That's really great. Kind of in that realm of stuff changing all the time and technology is changing constantly, how are you keeping up with these changes to provide your customers the best service?
Sure. I think there are the obvious tools, reading, peer-reviewed papers and things like that. And then just reading the news. The other thing, too, is listening to patrons because they will tell you what they want to learn. They'll tell you what they want to know. So I think just listening is important in that aspect. Does that kind of sort of answer the question?
Yes. You are perfectly fine.
So as we're wrapping things up, we wanted to get into a couple of questions that are a little more personal about your educational history and artistic background. So we were wondering how your pretty diverse educational background from philosophy and music and cinematography and all these cool things you've done, how has that influenced your career path?
I think it's helped me stay rounded. And it hasn't limited me to any one thing. I think if I had one piece of advice for young people, it's that it's good to have your goal. It's good to be good at something, but be open to new opportunities. Like I said, I never would have ever pictured myself working in a public library. So, just being open-minded to other opportunities and open to the idea that you could apply your skills in other ways, from a different perspective. I think that oftentimes because a lot of us are encouraged to go to college directly out of high school, there's not really a whole lot of time to think about, is this what I want to do? And then you're encouraged to stick with whatever it is that you've done. So I think we're kind of trained in education to be kind of rigid in our path. And my advice is to, have a path, but be willing to stray from it. Be willing to try other things, and listen to other people's advice too. When my friend said, "Hey, come check out the library," I could have very easily brushed that off and said, "Yeah, right. Don't have any interest in that. I have my computer business." But just exploring the option, just stopping by and checking it out, and was great, and it can change the course of your life. So yeah, like I said, my biggest advice for for any young person these days is just to be as open-minded as possible, because your career path is very likely going to go many directions throughout your life. And if you're willing to go with the flow of that, you'll be a lot happier of a person, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice. With your technological and your artistic abilities, does that help you with all of your roles here in the LINC Library?
It has. It really has. It's nice to not have to depend on the IT department every time something goes wrong. So having some self-reliance has definitely been an advantage here. I encourage everyone to become as technically educated as possible. Technology and its tools are definitely something you can't live without anymore. So as being more literate in technology is, I think, something that's doesn't have a lot of value placed on it, because everyone just kind of assumes that if you're under 30 that you already know how it all works. And I've found out that that's not necessarily true. So digital literacy is, I think, a big deal.
So our final question of the day, is there anything you would like to shout out for people to go check out, like a website, social media, anything like that?
Absolutely. If you want to use the studio space, you're going to go to mylibrary.us/studio. And from there, you can fill out the request form to come in here and utilize this space for yourself. And it's part of our mission this year to make sure that we have a larger amount of the community engaging with the library. Our goal is to have 60% of Greeley's population utilizing library services by 2028. So I personally have made it my mission to use this space as a platform for that. So I'd really like to see everyone coming here to use this space. And if we can use this as a way to encourage people to come back to the library and use these services, that's kind of my ultimate goal.
Awesome.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time today, and we really enjoyed this conversation. And for all of our listeners out there, stay tuned, and thank you for listening. And Josh, again, thank you for your time. And we'll see you next time on the Cashflow Project.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming.